Hi, and welcome to Creator Fundamentals. My name is Dan Courier, and it is my mission to simplify YouTube so you and I can grow together. Welcome, everybody, to our regularly scheduled live streams. For those of you who may be new to the live stream, we do this every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Tonight, we're doing kind of a focused topic. Typically, it's a subscriber, YouTuber hangout opportunity to ask general questions, but I took a vote earlier today, and everybody definitely has FTC and COPPA at the top of their mind. So we're going to do our best to have a conversation, try to answer some questions, or at least have a conversation about the questions that everybody is asking. So if you happen to be new to the live stream, definitely consider clicking the subscribe button and the bell notification icon so you're alerted to future videos and live streams. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. It's been a wild week. People have certainly been a bit frantic regarding FTC and COPPA and YouTube's role. And I've done a couple videos on a couple different topics related to this, and it has just been a wild ride. Again, if you notice the title, it's questions and answers, because as we all know, the information that is out there regarding COPPA is not super clear. It's a little bit ambiguous. We'll do our best to have a conversation today that tries to collect the actual or the most meaningful or clear information from FTC and the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. So we're definitely going to talk about that tonight. Just real quick before we get started, if you might notice in the upper right-hand corner, I am actually hosting a conference in Albany, New York. If you want to get together with like-minded creators and learn how to grow a business around YouTube and online video, definitely consider coming and hanging out with us at the People of Video Conference, Albany, New York, May 2nd and 3rd, 2020. You can find tickets and details at peopleofvideo.com. I'm going to jump in the chat and say hello to everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out tonight. We have a really good crowd. Hopefully we can have some meaningful conversation, try to answer some questions for people. Plus, I'm going to do my best to direct you to what I believe is probably the best resource in terms of trying to understand this stuff yourself. Obviously, when we're dealing with information that comes directly from the government, everybody is kind of hesitant to make any definitive statements one way or the other because they don't want to give you legal advice. In fact, as much as I tried to stay away from specific advice in my videos, I still have people screaming at me in the comments telling everybody or telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about and to go to the source and all this other good stuff. But the idea here is just to inform you. It's definitely the expectation that you need to continue that education and don't take any comments or statements from any one individual in terms of understanding exactly what this is all about. FTC.gov is certainly a great resource to try to find this information. I'm going to show you a particular part of that website that actually gives you some information regarding FTC and COPPA. Hello to everybody. We're going to try and do our best to have a conversation relating to a lot of the questions relating to COPPA. The thing about this is it's kind of a tough situation because we're dealing with essentially in a lot of cases, you're looking at outdated information that is still part of COPPA that I believe was written originally in 1998. They made some revisions to it and all that. So if you do have a specific question, I'd ask you to tag at Creator Fundamentals in the chat and then ask your question. We'll do our best to get to that. But I see a bunch of really common questions. I've seen them over and over again on the videos that I've covered on this topic. And a lot of time it has to do with people. It seems like there's more questions from the people who don't think they are directed to children than channels that are in fact made for kids. The reality is, if you know that you're targeting kids with your content, you need to mark your videos as made for kids. And yes, at this point in time, that's going to come with some restrictions being added in terms of no comments, no notifications, no community tab, no stories. And that kind of puts you in a position, well, hey, how do I get anybody on my channel to view my videos? Now, I'd like to be able to tell you, hey, come up with another way to engage with your audience and keep track of everybody and send out your own notifications by creating a mailing list or something like that. The only thing that I don't know yet is how mailing lists interact with COPPA, because if you were attempting to do that, obviously there's a requirement for parental consent anytime you collect personal identifiable information from a minor. Then what is the mechanism by which you are required to make sure that children under the age of 13 are not signing up for your mailing list? That's something that I don't think is built into a lot of mailing lists and mailing list platforms. So I'm really kind of curious how the Online Protection Act relates to mailing lists and exactly how to best do that. But in theory, if there was a way to do that, I would say that you definitely want to create a connection with your audience outside the features of YouTube. But obviously, you have to do that within the guidelines of the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. Now, I recently did a video, a rant of sorts, where I was talking about how this really isn't YouTube's problem and people were railing against YouTube. And I've kind of changed my tune on that after reading some interesting information regarding exactly how YouTube got caught, or the ruling in which they were fined $170 million. And I'm going to show that article to you because I think it's really interesting, and it does. The more information I see, the more it kind of seems that maybe YouTube did kind of throw some creators under the bus, and we're going to talk about that as well. Dexter, Toma, I heard that this will not stand because of the Constitution. What is your take on that? Obviously, people are going to make all kinds of arguments against this, and I can imagine that. So here's the first thing we want to address is, at the moment, these rules are not in effect yet. You currently have the opportunity to submit comment to the FTC regarding COPPA and potential tweaks to these rules. So I highly encourage anybody who's watching this live stream who has not submitted a comment to the FTC to make sure you do so. My last video has links to do the FTC comment. You can also search for COPPA comment, and that'll probably come up that way. But if you look at my last video, that is the fight back against FTC COPPA, there is a link in there where you can go to the actual comment section on FTC. Now, let me tell you something. There's all kinds of people that are heading over to this comment section. If you're going to go to the comment section just to bitch about how you think this is unfair and you sound like an infant while you're doing it, you're not helping the cause. You're probably hurting the cause because you're just filling up the comment section with a bunch of nonsense. You need to carefully articulate why we need them to take a closer look at COPPA and evaluate the ambiguity or the lack of clarity in the rule as it exists today. Most of the questions that I'm seeing have to do with people who are like, hey, I had a kid in one of my videos. Does that mean I'm made for kids? Or I do a Lego channel, but I'm doing builds for adult Lego fans. Am I a kids channel? Obviously, there's a bunch of different factors that go into play into that, but you really want to make sure that you're not just going there to complain, because that's not really helpful to the cause. And if we want to have any chance of actually getting our voices heard and getting people to, or getting the FTC to look at these comments and actually, respond in a positive way to them, we got to do our best to give them meaningful information that allows them to look at the right things and kind of rethink COPPA and look at how it's written and the fact that it is ambiguous or it lacks clarity to the point where people just simply don't know what the scenario is, or like they mentioned multiple different things. Well, hey, do you have child actors? Is it, kid themes? Is it something a kid might find appealing? All these different things that go into play, which we're going to show you because I think people are taking each one of those piecemeal with the idea that any one of those means you're automatically made for kids, and I don't think that's the case. But we will, in fact, look at that. But I do see some people tagging me in the chat, and I want to jump into the chat real quick before that gets too crazy. And I did see a super chat earlier, and I do want to thank you for that. Let me get up there real quick before it runs away. Thank you so much to Dirty D's. This won't affect most creators, says Dirty D's. Thank you so much for the super chat. And I think ideally what we would all like to believe, and what may in fact be the case, is this is really something for channels that actively target kids and they have a child audience. I can think of YouTube channels that are clearly designed for kids content, and that's who they're targeting, and you can tell by the way they make their videos, the way that everything is branded, and you know, the storylines and all of that stuff. The other ones that are kind of you know, great topics, we're going to try to touch base, and I'll show you some information that kind of may give you a little bit of clarity on that. And I want to make sure that I get that set up here in the background. Make sure. All right, let's see if we do that there. Okay, so I'm going to put a link in the, let's see, do I still have that saved? All right, so I'm going to put a link in the chat right now. I want you guys to copy this link and just save it somewhere on your desktop so you can look at it later. But it is a link to a great collection of resources related to this. Alex, thank you so much for the super chat. The free YouTube super chat. I appreciate it. We will get to the tags, but there's something I want to show you guys real quick. So if you go to that link, which is dlinks.cc/Coppa Guidance, it's going to bring you to this channel, or this page right here. And here we have a bunch of related information. It gives you the 6-step compliance plan for your business, and this looks into the whole thing of determine if your company or website or online service collects personal information. And here, for those of you who don't know, on the surface, when you hear about personal identifiable information, which it refers to as PI here, you normally think of like name and address, email, etc. But the thing that got YouTube in trouble and subsequently has put us in the place that we are in is this section right here, which is a persistent identifier that can be used to recognize a user over time and across different sites, including a cookie number, an IP address, a processor or device serial number, or a unique identifier. So it turns out cookies are not for kids, because in this case, YouTube is using those cookies to collect personal viewing habits of their users. Now, you might say, hey, but it's not, you know, it shouldn't apply to YouTube because YouTube is in fact not, it explicitly states that they are 13 and over. And that was basically how YouTube was reacting or operating in terms of how it was not adhering to COPPA. And I want to show you guys, and I'll find it here. We want to grab an article, FTC. I'll show you. Yeah, here it is. I want to show you the particular wording that was part of this entire thing that I had not seen. And after reading this, I kind of rethought my entire mindset that, hey, maybe YouTube is a little more at fault than we believe them to be, because this was kind of eye-opening right here. We'll put that right there. Okay. So we know that YouTube is kind of like, hey, we don't have to comply with COPPA because we explicitly state that our platform is made for children 13 and over. But if you look at this section right here in terms of the complaint against YouTube, it identifies that YouTube was marketing itself to advertisers, saying things like Google and YouTube told Mattel, maker of Barbie and Monster High toys, that YouTube is today's leader in reaching children 6 to 11 against top TV channels. And they told Hasbro, which makes My Little Pony and Play-Doh, that YouTube is the #1 website regularly visited by kids. So YouTube, unfortunately, was talking out of both sides of their mouth. On the one half, saying, "Hey, we don't really have to comply with COPPA because we're not a YouTube channel or a website that is directed towards kids." And on the other side, they were telling advertisers, "Hey, we're the place all the kids go." So obviously, that's kind of ultimately what screwed them and us in the process. And the more you kind of reflect on this, the changes that are going into place are not so much related to the fact that COPPA requires all of these changes, because YouTube obviously has a marketing structure here that is based on it's based on personalized ads. What YouTube could in fact do is come up with different ways to deal with this. But basically, the way I understand it, or the way that I've interpreted it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but because everything that YouTube does is based on personalized ads, which are contingent upon collecting personal identifiable information through the use of cookies and tracking people's viewer history, they don't really have the ability or the inclination or the desire to split those two things apart. So rather than saying, hey, we're going to find a way to deliver advertising and allow people to interact with their audience without collecting or without getting consent from people who may or may not be minors, which, all things told, is probably a pretty difficult thing to figure out. But in any event, they're just like, hey, this is our business model. This is how we collect money. We are going to cut off any channels that are focused on kids that have a child audience from collecting personal identifiable information, which in turn basically means they have to separate them from the advertising platform, because that's how their advertising works. It's all based on collecting personal identifiable information. So that kind of puts us where we are. So definitely some fault going on with regards to YouTube. But as I said, in the short term, the best thing that you can do is not sit here and complain about it, but get out there and make your comment, make a well thought out comment to the FTC. Also sign the petition that Jeremy Johnson put out there. It's closing in on the 500,000 signature goal that it was that it has listed, so definitely do that. Those are the things that we can do in the short term. And I'm going to go in here and look at some of your questions. I see some tags there, and I'm already kind of envisioning the types of questions that these are. And the reality is we're going to be able to point you in the direction of some information as put up by FTC, but whether we'll be able to pinpoint tell you whether your particular channel is or isn't for kids might not totally work. All right, let's see what we got. How can a brand new kids channel get noticed on YouTube in 2020 with so many features disabled that help with the YouTube algorithm? So again, the first thing that we need to understand, or we basically need to see where everything settles. If everything stays exactly the way it is, the next question becomes, how do individual creators create a means to interact with their audience that also is in compliance with COPPA? So you basically, outside of YouTube, for example, the way I understand it, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, this is just my interpretation, this is not legal advice, I'm not a lawyer. In order to, you have to do one of two things. You either have to make sure that you are not collecting personal identifiable information from anyone under the age of 13, or if you are collecting information, you have to have a system in place which obtains the consent of their parents to do so. So that's kind of where the position that we are in. So in a world where YouTube just says, we're not making any changes, we're not doing kids content anymore, that would create a massive opportunity for another platform to step in and say, hey, we'll come up with a way to create a interaction between a viewer and the site that allows us to identify age and also to get consent from the parent, or get consent from the parent. If somebody can do that, then you're kind of back in the ballgame, because YouTube, in theory, could do something in terms of interacting with the accounts to kind of certify potentially to COPPA's agreement, a way to certify that somebody is of proper age in order to interact with YouTube. Obviously, that creates a whole lot other obstacles, but in theory, that could still play out. So I personally don't think YouTube is just going to throw their hands up and say, this is too hard. But I do think so. For those of you who don't know, I have a full-time job. I'm an analyst in a database environment, and I've always been an analyst of various types in various software companies, and I work to basically solve problems. And the way that I have always learned to solve a problem is basically in the short term and the long term. In the short term, you want to triage the problem. You want to stop the bleeding. You want to look at the problem and say, what do we have to do now to fix our biggest pain point, and put something in place in the short term so we don't bleed out while we're trying to figure out a long-term solution. And I think that, or I'm hopeful at least, that the changes that YouTube has put in place here, or that they're going to put in place in December, are in fact the triage front side of hopefully a plan that will somehow adapt to these rules. The idea that YouTube would just throw away all the potential opportunity of having kids' content from all these creators seems kind of far-fetched to me. I saw somebody else who thought maybe YouTube would go corporate and they would basically create or control all of the kids' content, so they have more control over who's doing what and what consent is happening and all that other stuff. That's a possibility as well, but the idea that they would just roll over on all the obvious kids' content out there would be a surprising turn of events. So hopefully they are simply triaging. They're taking steps now to make sure that they aren't out of compliance and not subject to fines while they come up with a long-term solution that can adapt to these rules and make sure that they're in compliance going forward. That's personally where I think this situation is going to pan out, but only time will tell. All right, so way behind on the chat here, but there's so much to talk about on this. I have a question. Can I take a kid-friendly video game character like Mario or Sonic and make them do inappropriate stuff, swearing? So that up until this fiasco, doing what you're mentioning there, taking a kid's figure and making adult content with it, was against YouTube terms of service. That would get you potentially banned, or at least should have gotten you banned. I personally reported, I had some random dude come on my channel and leave a comment swearing and cursing at me, and I went and looked at their channel, and it looked like a My Little Pony channel, but it was all adult content. Really gross stuff. Reported that channel repeatedly, and YouTube never did anything to it. I do believe, though, that is content that is against YouTube terms of service, and it's something that they tried to put an end to when we had, I think it was like Elsa Gate, they called it, or something, where there was inappropriate content that looked like children's content. So I definitely wouldn't recommend that you do that, because I think that would put you in all kinds of crosshairs. But it's so hard to tell now because we've all been trying to adjust to a family-friendly environment, only to now be on the flip side of trying to figure out how to avoid being confused for family-friendly content. It's really been a roller coaster ride here with regards to FTC and COPPA. So we are all just trying to process this information as much as possible and come up with, the best case scenarios. But that's why, I made the video about don't freak out about this, because you need to be in the right state of mind to process this information and make sure you're taking the best approach. That particular video was about don't go out and delete all your stuff because we don't know what's going to happen yet. This could not be as big of a deal. This could be a huge deal. We need to see how it pans out, how the FTC is going to interpret and interact and respond to the comments that everybody is sending to the FTC. And before any of that happens, I think it's a rash decision to delete all your content. I suggested that somebody mark all their content for made for kids if they were worried about fines, and I had people that came back to me and they were like, well, you can get fined if it's marked for kids and it's not. I don't know if that's a true statement or not, because COPPA is Child Online Privacy Protection Act. They want you to certify that if you're collecting private, personally identifiable information from a minor, that you get the consent of the parent. if you mark all of your videos to made for kids, YouTube is essentially going to cut you off from the entire PI collecting part of their platform. So I would think that would completely separate you from COPPA, because any content at the moment that is marked as made for kids, to me, that basically separates you from COPPA altogether, because YouTube is creating all these things. They're taking away your comments. They're taking away your personalized ads. They're taking away your notifications and your community tab and your stories in an effort to separate you from their system that makes its living off of collecting personal information. So I think in that regard, I personally don't, at least this is the way that I've interpreted it. Again, not a lawyer, consult a lawyer, all that good stuff. Don't take your business advice from me. But the way I would interpret that is, if you mark your content made for kids, then you have been separated, the way YouTube seems to be going, from all of the personal identifiable information, which I think would separate you from liability with COPPA. If anybody knows it different, definitely tag me and leave it in the comments below, but that's the way that I've interpreted the information that I've read thus far. All right, so let's see here. We've got Japanese anime is being marked for kids by YouTube when it's not. How do you feel that hentai, Japanese anime? I have not heard or seen that they are flagging that as made for kids. Again, though, YouTube is probably doing everything based on an algorithm, and they may just be doing it based on animation, which is a really scary thing to do, considering some of the content that's out there that's certainly animation that's not intended for kids. So only time will tell. What I would say is YouTube's automated systems are not going to get everything right. So if you think that you have a topic that is in fact not made for kids, then that's something you need to approach with your own thoughts and make the most honest assessment of that. The one thing that I would not do is, if you definitely know you make content for kids, don't try to sneak past and say you don't. If you sincerely believe that you're not making content for kids, then you're probably not making content for kids. The other thing that I wanted to show you guys, and I got to see if I can pull that up here, but I'm trying to catch up on the chat here. I know I'm way behind. So what does the FTC expect kids to watch? They're just trying to keep kids off of YouTube. That seems to be the only goal. I don't think that YouTube definitely does not want to keep kids off of YouTube. YouTube doesn't want to get fined anymore, because it doesn't make good business sense to be fined $170 million. And when you have infrastructure as big as YouTube, making systematic changes to comply with a federal regulation is not as simple as saying, okay, we'll comply. There's all kinds of stuff that needs to be recoded and changed, and algorithms and everything else that they would have to deal with. That's why, coming from a software background, that's why I think that this is short-term triage, where they're trying to stop the bleeding to make sure that they're not getting fined while they come up with a long-term solution and see what's most viable going forward. It's just not simple for any software company or system to, turn on a dime and start operating in a different way. Things have to be tested. Systems speak to other systems. It's such a complicated process that this could take them, potentially could take them a year to make changes that effectively do all of this stuff. So I still think there is a lot that we have not learned, that we have not seen, that's going to unfold in the coming months and in 2020, that makes it way too soon to do anything rash like deleting your videos. And I'm sorry to is it Trilexter, who says they deleted their videos already. That's definitely something that I would avoid doing until we see how all of this pans out. All right, so let's see here. Trying to catch up. We have Andrew Hager, I had to delete a few videos I set to private. I didn't want to take any chances. You know what? And if you have an entire channel of not made for kids, and maybe you did that one video where you're like, yeah, I was kind of targeting kids, and it's not like something that's absolutely crushing it on your channel, it's not going to kill you to get rid of a video or two. You just want to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. And if it's peace of mind and you're like, hey, it's not even worth it for me to keep this video, let me get rid of this video. Everything else is definitely not made for kids. I'm good to go. You know, everybody has to make their own personal decisions. One of the things that I find amazing is how many people come on to, you know, the live stream or videos and leave comments, and they expect to get a definitive answer from some YouTuber who's just trying to process this information like everybody else. I'm not an expert, not trying to be an expert, not trying to present myself as an expert, simply trying to process this information as we receive it and make rational decisions based on the information that they provided. It's especially challenging in this situation because the information that we have is so vague, and it's really the ambiguity or the vagueness of that information that is causing most of the freak out. It's real. If you know you make content for kids, there's nothing to do there except, yeah, it kind of sucks, and hopefully it only sucks in the short term because they're taking away all your ways to communicate and make money, or, you know, potentially lose 90% of your revenue off of the personalized ads. On the flip side, people are losing their minds over the $42,000 fines because they don't have confidence as to whether or not they're making content for kids or not, because they've heard everything that basically looks at different factors that they would potentially use to determine that. And then somebody will be like, oh, well, they said, hey, if it has a kid in it. Well, yeah, that's one of the factors. And that's how they present it. I'll try to find the particular article that outlines that. But it's not like it, and YouTube made matters worse by coming out with their video that says, here are the factors to consider when determining whether you make content for kids. But they present them in such a way that you don't know if it's any one of those factors immediately means made for kids, which I don't think is the case. Is all animation made for kids? No. Is animation a potential factor in determining whether or not a video is made for kids? Sure, animation, probably the majority of animation is made for kids, but there are other factors. And the idea that FTC is just going to go, oh, hey, does it have a kid in it? They check a single box and they go, yeah, made for kids. Probably not how they're going to do that type of assessment. But that's certainly how people have been responding to this issue. So let's see here. We are scrolling down. I see some more. Oh, just shot me down. Hey, Beanie Draws. All right, we've got... As Doug Houston says, how about signing the petition and sending your comments to the FTC? Absolutely agree with that. And we have 274 people in the live stream right now. If you are hanging out in the live stream, definitely hit that thumbs up. And if you want to see future content that can help you simplify YouTube, definitely consider clicking that subscribe button and the bell notification icon so you don't miss a thing. If you just jump into live stream, we're talking FTC and COPPA, trying to do our best to wrap our brains around the information, the limited, the less than clear information that we've received from YouTube, the FTC, relating to COPPA and YouTube's terms of service changes, trying to process all this information, try to make the most informed decisions, and trying not to be too rash in our decisions, like going out and deleting your channel. I don't recommend that to be the best approach. And I do think we have an opportunity that in the that the changes that we're seeing are hopefully short-term changes. As I mentioned, if you're just joining the stream, the idea that personally having a background in problem solving and troubleshooting, you want to stop the bleeding. If you have an issue that you need to fix, you're going to look for your short-term emergency fix, which is, triage, stop the bleeding in the short term long enough so you can assess the situation and figure out how to come up with a long-term solution. I'm hoping that's what YouTube is doing here so they can assess what changes they would need to make YouTube more compliant with COPPA, because right now they're basically just severing all ties between their personal identifiable information collecting machine, which is the advertising system that we all know and love that gives us our personalized ads and makes us all money. from anything relating to kids. And that just seems like the obvious way to go. Hey, this is the system that is the violation of COPPA. This is the content that COPPA cares about. Let's take this system and this content and divide them for now, which is what they've done. They're basically severing the ties between the system that collects personal identifiable information and the content that is potentially targeting kids. That seems like the obvious choice. I think that's what any company or entity would do is, hey, let's pull the plug on these particular features that are causing us grief and pain and causing us the $170 million fine. And then once we do that, then we can let the dust settle and figure out how to come up with a long-term solution that serves the needs of our advertisers and our creators and the platform as a whole. That's what I'm hopeful that they're doing. That is a typical thing that you see when you're dealing with software and systems, especially a system as complex as YouTube. So many moving parts and so many things they would have to tweak to basically redesign their their whole system for making money through advertisers and content creation. Sparked Family TV. That's the complication, talking about the algorithm could flag it because it could be made for kids. I see many people cussing up storms now in videos. Yeah, and it's a funny thing because people now are like, hey, I don't want to be mistaken for kids, so I'm going to start making content, dropping F-bombs and everything and every other word just so people know my videos aren't made for kids. And I don't even necessarily think that just swearing in your videos is going to be the telltale sign that your videos aren't made for kids. But again, we're dealing with a lack of clarity in the information that's out there and a little bit of panic because, Andrew Smith, who is the director of the FTC, goes out and makes comments talking about the idea of fish in a barrel and, really furthering panicking people more than was necessary. Andrew, I got a lot of friends who are scared of what's to become of YouTube. What can I tell them so they stop worrying? I think it's too soon to know how this is going to play out. Yes, there are potential outcomes to this that are very undesirable for content creators who target kids. And I do think regardless of the outcome, even if there's a light at the end of the tunnel, it might be painful for 6 months or in the short term while they make adjustments to find a path to getting that revenue back to the kids' channels without violating COPPA. But I just think I think people are jumping the gun. They are, they're walking through the ship and they step in a puddle and they dive off the side of the boat before it even starts sinking. It is potentially an issue that all of us are going to have to be concerned with, but I don't think we've gotten close enough to it to really see its impact. And I think people should try to adapt as we move forward, prepare for those which will probably be kind of tough times in that short term, but hopefully they are trying to find a way around this. View to a grill. I would have liked to see made for all ages setting. I have grilling, barbecue. So that's one of the problems because YouTube's claim was that YouTube was made for general audiences. And FTC basically said, oh, you can't just claim general audiences if part of that audience is definitely kids. And that kind of got YouTube in some trouble. And I want to see if I can find that particular... Oh, let's see. Several channel owners told YouTube and Google that their channel's content was directed to children. In other instances, YouTube's own content rating system identified content as directed to children. According to Complete, YouTube manually reviewed children's content from its YouTube platform to feature it in its YouTube Kids app. Despite the knowledge of channels directed to children on the YouTube platform, YouTube served targeted advertisements on these channels. Tisk, YouTube, you gave us all a big headache to deal with. I wanted to find the part. I am going to, on the replay of this, I will put a link here, and let me do this real quick. Bear with me 2 seconds. I'm going to give you a link to the article that's on the FTC about the actual $170 million ruling, because I think that is something that provides some additional insight in terms of what YouTube did wrong and might give us some idea. FTC 170, we'll call that. We'll put that in there. So this is another link I'm going to throw in the chat. I would save that somewhere, because that is going to direct you to the FTC's article related to the settlement. And let's make sure YouTube lets it get out to the FTC, because those redirects out of YouTube are kind of slow. In any event, let's see what we got here. I'll try my best to make sure these changes don't affect the future of my channel, says Andrew. Let's see. I keep ending up on Andrew. Z Mega Man, and what about a channel who has videos that have a mix of various audiences? So again, I would try to assess each video based on the criteria of whether or not you intended to make that video for kids. And I would also look at your channel as a whole to determine whether or not you have kids in mind when you, created the channel and the content around it. Rather than because ultimately, if you're trying to nitpick and go, oh, well, maybe this could be for kids, but maybe you could argue that it wasn't. If you intended to make it for kids, then you definitely need to mark it that way. I mean, that would be, if that's how I would do it if it was me. Again, no legal advice from me. Talk to a lawyer if you're concerned. But generally speaking, if it was my channel, and I would just base it on whether or not my content was made for kids. Personally, on my channel, Creator Fundamentals, I don't think I make content for kids. But what if YouTube, or what if the FTC wanted to say, well, you make content about YouTube, and we've deemed YouTube as focused towards kids, and kids make YouTube channels? I don't think they're going to go that route. And I personally, based on the assessment of how I made the channel and intended to make the channel, I don't target children in the content that I make. So I marked all my videos as not made for children. But again, people are basically going down that path. We're like, oh my God, I make videos for YouTubers, and YouTubers can be kids, and kids, am I a kids channel or not? I think people are overthinking this to a certain degree. Again, I can't tell you one way or other how to handle your channel, but I would say if it was me and it wasn't my intention to make content for kids, I would mark my channel accordingly. And that's another thing. A lot of people are talking about channels being deleted. There is nothing about COPPA has to do with nuking anybody's channel. What they are saying is if you violate COPPA, so if you just ignore this and you don't mark, and you try to pretend that your videos aren't made for kids when they are, and you mark them all as not made for kids, and then they find your video and that it's collecting personal information from an obvious child audience, that's where you run into trouble. That's where YouTube could basically suspend your YouTube account and your Google account and all that other stuff. So that's not something that you want to mess around with. YouTube is not going out to pick out channels and delete them. No, they're not, going through and deleting a bunch of channels in January or anything like that. As far as I know, I don't think that's in the works. But if you go out of your way to hide the fact that you're making content for kids, yeah, you could get your channel and your Google account suspended or terminated completely. All right, let's see. The Huntsman, wasn't there already a bot sweep of the system? Oh, in terms of marking the made for kids or not made for kids, there very well could have been. I have seen comments, people talking about how their videos were set. Personally, I went in and just set all my videos. So you guys can let me know in the comments whether your videos were automatically set to made for kids or not made for kids, because I didn't. I have not specifically seen an article that talked about that. All right, we covered that. My channel be affected, especially those. So that's another great question. Will non-monetized channels be affected by this, especially those who mark their videos as made for kids, and will they face extreme fines? So I don't think anybody who marks their content made for kids is going to be subject to fines. That's how I would interpret that. The idea of whether or not a channel that is not monetized is involved in this is certainly interesting, because I would imagine, see, the other part of this is I also don't think that your videos would show up in search. That is an interesting, it's kind of an interesting, I honestly don't know. I don't know how having not having monetization is going to affect this, and I haven't seen anything from YouTube that explicitly identifies what to do in that situation, because obviously there's a bunch of channels out there that aren't monetized yet. What I would probably do, based on the notifications that I have seen, if the setup shows me the option to mark made for kids or not made for kids, and you'll see that when you upload, if you're using the new upload process, or you'll see it on the video, the edit the video page for a given video. If that feature's there, I would answer it to the best of my ability. I honestly don't know if it appears for non-monetized channels. If you have a non-monetized channel and you've uploaded recently, let me know if you're being given that option to select made for kids or not made for kids, because the way I look at it, if it shows up, you should be answering it. Do you think YouTube restated that they have the right to remove channels if they are not viable because they're going to execute a channel purge to offset the FTC fine? Absolutely not. The commercially viable message from YouTube had nothing to do with deleting channels that don't make money. That was absolutely not what that section was about. YouTube has come out and stated on Twitter on multiple occasions that that particular section means if the offering the service is not commercially viable. The good example of that is the old Creator Studio, the old version of the studio on YouTube. It's a feature that they have determined doesn't make sense to continue, and they're going to do away with that service, that part of the service, which is that feature. That is what that section means. It has nothing to do with going out and deleting your channels. And there's a video on my channel that talks about that as well, because people were freaking out thinking that meant, hey, if we don't make money, then they're going to delete our channels. Nobody stopped to think how you'd ever get new YouTube channels if they deleted channels that didn't make money, because you don't start on YouTube being monetized, and it takes you a while to get to 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours. So how in the world would any additional channels ever be created if they were going to delete channels that didn't make money? People need to think these things through, and a lot of times they don't, and they just kind of panic and they run with it, and then somebody will panic and make a video to share their panic, and then everybody watches the video, and then they all panic, and it just creates a nightmare situation. So yes, they are not going to do a channel purge based on that commercially viable message that they are adjusting in the terms of service. Hawk Gaming, what are your thoughts on the rumors that this could be the end of money being made on YouTube? That's a ridiculous idea, because YouTube only makes money because there's content creators. YouTube can't survive without the content creators. They do have their own own shows and stuff that they make, but I doubt very highly that those are even close to the amount of content and the revenue that they make off of content from creators. So the idea, you can't stop the money because there's no incentive. People aren't going to make content for free so YouTube can collect advertising dollars. That doesn't make any sense. It can get, once you start getting into this and you start focusing on making quality content, it does start to cost money, and nobody's going to do it for free, especially when YouTube is doing advertising on the other side. All right. J.E. Smith says the fines are apparently not a $40,000 flat rate. It's going to be based on the revenue made on the video and the percentage of the children who view it. I have seen no information to that end, but that's certainly an interesting angle. If you have a resource of where you found that information, definitely let me know in the chat, and we'll take a look at that, and we'll share that with the audience if we can get some solid information about that. Let's see. That's a great question. Zockstar, when a YouTube user has no account, they can still watch nearly everything except restricted videos. How does YouTube determine how old these anonymous people are? I would imagine that without logging into YouTube, you're not creating a situation where they can track you, because there's no account to tie that information to. So I would imagine that you're not going to get personalized advertising on somebody who's not logged into YouTube, because there's no way for them to track the viewing habits of an anonymous user. That would be my guess. Not 100%, but that's what I would think is the case for people who aren't actually logged in. How do you think this will affect builder channels like woodworking, welding, blacksmithing, etc.? Again, if you're making that type of content and you know that you're not targeting that content towards kids, then, you know, if it was me, if it was my content, then I would mark it as not made for kids. I made the argument, one of the example that I provided in my FTC comment, I'm like, my kid loves farming equipment. So he, you know, tractors and things, he loves those. Does that make the John Deere YouTube channel a made for kids channel? No, of course it doesn't. Nobody's going to think that. So the idea that other stuff that may be attractive to kids is going to be deemed as a kids channel, I really don't think that's going to be the case. And I just think that they need to clarify the wording that identifies what made for kids actually looks like. All right, here. What do you think about checking the I do not want interest-based ads button? You know, I don't know that. Let's see where the interest-based. The one thing that I would say about that is I haven't seen any guidance from YouTube providing that as a viable option. So that would make me curious about whether that would serve the purpose. Is that on an actual video, or is that on... I honestly don't recall where that particular setting is. Definitely let me know in the comments where that is. We'll try to take a look. Let's see here. Would zoo vlogs be labeled kids? Again, you know, trying to answer individual topics, it's just something that people are going to have to use their common sense on to determine whether or not you intended to make content for kids. If you are doing vlogs at the zoo and you're presenting information like you were teaching kids about animals in elementary school, then yeah, maybe there may be an argument for that. If you're just doing general, you know, information about wildlife or outdoor, the zoo, then not necessarily made for kids. But again, everybody's going to have to make that decision on their own, based on their own feelings on the topic. But I do think people are just really overthinking it, and they're getting really paranoid about the threat of a fee. And I don't think that it is the FTC's goal to just absolutely crush somebody by saying, well, we could possibly interpret that your content was made for kids. You know, I would think it'd be much more likely that it would be the obvious offenders who would be targeted first, but I can't speak for the FTC. I don't know what their plans are, but that's how my brain works. All right. What about games that are rated everyone, but since it's cartoon-like, do you think they will flag it, as in Sims or Roblox? Roblox, to me, I think is definitely kids' content. The Sims, yeah, I mean, I think those are probably going to fall into the realm of kids' content as well, just based on percentages. Yeah, there may be some adults that play those games, but I would think the vast majority of the user base for those games is kids. So it might be a harder sell to be like, no, I'm not making Minecraft videos for kids. I'm making them for adults. You know, adults do play Minecraft, but it'd be a hard argument to say that, hey, I'm not making this content that is super popular with kids for kids. I'm just making it for adults. So those are there's definitely some gaming things that you know, people are going to have to just take a look at the type of content, who the majority of that audience typically is, and try to make decisions based on that. Why does this feel like a Jeet pie all over again? Yeah, it kind of does. Just in time, would you agree we can push through this? Yeah, I mean, I definitely think at this point, it's tough and it's scary, and there's people, you know, who obviously have their livelihood at stake on it. I do think that if you are an obvious made-for-kids channel, there's going to be some pain involved in the short term. Hopefully, there are some ways to work on that. But the thing that surprises me is that after having Adpocalypse a bunch of times where people's revenue was impacted and you know, Elsa Gate and those kind of things where they were making changes to kids' content, I would hope that those who were heavily relying on revenue would have taken action back then to start diversifying their revenue. Here on Creator Fundamentals, that's one of the things I tell people all the time. Diversify your revenue. Don't be so dependent on one stream of revenue, the ads, for example, that if something happens beyond your control, that it's just going to absolutely destroy you. Use the audience to create a platform off of YouTube to be able to engage, you know, Facebook groups, all those things, to be able to interact with the people in your community, so you have multiple ways to reach out to them, or you have multiple ways to interact and to develop revenue streams to offset the revenue that you get from ads. You know, and depending on the type of content that you make, that could be you know, products, it could be merch, it could be courses. If you do type of educational content, you can obviously do different things, you know, product lines and whatnot that can help you find different ways to make money. All right, let me scroll back down here. If you're just entering the live stream, hello everyone, my name is Dan Courier. This is Creator Fundamentals. I thank you guys for coming and hanging out with us this evening. We're talking FTC and COPPA. If you're new to the live stream, definitely consider clicking that subscribe button and the bell notification icon so you receive future notifications on videos that can help you simplify YouTube. Also, while you're in here, definitely click that thumbs up button so I know you were here. I appreciate everybody coming and hanging out tonight. We're talking about COPPA, the information that's provided. I'm going to give links to a number of resources on the replay of this video. I've shared a couple of them in the chat as well. You can go to, and I'll throw this in the chat again for anybody who may have come in late, dlinks.cc, and it is Coppa Guidance. Everybody's looking for guidance on this topic, and that link is, it didn't show up as an actual URL, did it? Oh, good old YouTube chat. It's got all its problems. dlinks.cc/Coppa Guidance. There you go. That's a link that leads to some resources that are put up by the FTC to help you determine whether or not your content is made for kids or not. It should be common sense. I know there's some ambiguity out there, and people are kind of concerned about not making the incorrect selection, but try to use your heads, try to be reasonable about it, and try to make the most realistic response to identifying your content. WWE can be classified as under 13. See, yeah, I actually think WWE is an example of something that has a much more adult audience than kids. Just when you consider, all the arena shows and things that they do. Yeah, kids are certainly a part of that, but that's kind of an interesting one. I wouldn't particularly identify WWE as under 13. Doll Parts Brandy says interest-based ads button is on the same page as Mark for Kids, just lower down the screen. So let's take a look here and go here. Let's see. Age restricted there, and all these features. Let me see if it's on the entire, let's see, channel, advanced settings. All right, so in this section, we're going to read, we can read this here. Well, I can, in theory, read this because it's really small. Let's see. Move that up there so we can actually read it. If you select this option, personalized ads will not be shown on videos on your channel, such as ads based on a viewer's interest or remarketing ads. This may significantly reduce your channel's revenue. In addition, earned action reports and remarketing lists will stop working for your channel. Turning off interest-based advertising may result in fewer ads being eligible to show on your channel and potentially less ad revenue. Your channel viewers will continue to see ads, and they may be based on the viewer's general location, such as city or state. I mean, in theory, that would sound like a viable option, but I think if you mark your... If you're asking whether or not marking this would allow you to keep some of your other features, like your community tab and your notifications and your stories and all that, I haven't heard anything that indicates that. But this right here is basically what would happen if you marked your entire channel as made for kids, because you will still get advertising. So you will get these... the ads that they're talking about that aren't interest-based ads on your channel. So I honestly don't know the answer to that. I haven't seen any guidance from YouTube on that. But it doesn't seem like, I don't know if that's even considered an option. because it's my understanding, based on all the steps that YouTube is taking, that advertising is not the only system on YouTube that collects personal information, because I don't believe that people can search for your videos either. And search is obviously based in part on your viewing history as well. So that relates to personal identifiable information. So I'm thinking that even if you turned off ads, there's still other parts of YouTube that they would have to separate you from if in fact your videos were made for kids. All right, let's see here. Hunter Banks, hey, would channels that discuss animated shows such as cartoons and anime be potential channels to be affected by COPPA? Again, guys, the idea is who is your intended audience? How are you talking about them? What is the topic? What is the focus of those conversations? I don't think it wouldn't be my reasonable assertion that simply having animation identifies it as a kids or made for kids content. It's just one of the factors that goes into it. But I do think that you need to consider what your intention is in terms of the content that you're making. If you try to bypass the other restrictions, you'll be up a creek without a paddle, says Beanie Draws. Let's see. How will the FTC fine people in other countries like Canada? I think the biggest threat for people that are outside the U.S. is that Google and YouTube is a U.S. company. So, you know, fines aside, YouTube will just terminate your account, and you'll lose your Google account and your YouTube account. Construction Crony says Canada has stricter rules against advertising to kids. David Gibson says, please understand, folks, that family-friendly content and kids' content are two completely different things. And I tend to agree with that, because family-friendly content just means general viewing that's not offensive and that is acceptable to watch by anybody. Just because content is acceptable to watch by anybody does not mean that you are focusing your content for kids. You know, so an example, the morning talk shows like Good Morning America or whatever the ones are now. I don't watch a lot of TV in the morning or on the regular airways, but something like that is obviously family friendly. You're not going to see anything on that that's generally offensive to anybody, but at the same time, that's not content that's made for kids. So, yes, one would imagine that content that's made for kids is part of content that is family friendly, but all family friendly content is not necessarily made for kids. All right, and let's see here. How do you think the fines will be for non-monetized channels? Again, I don't think I think people are focused too much on the fines. If you do what you're supposed to do, and you do it in good faith, and you identify your content as you're supposed to identify your content, I don't think you should be particularly worried about the fines. A lot of chat in here trying to... Again, if anybody has any questions, you can tag at Creator Fundamentals in the chat, and I will do my best to get to those. I appreciate everybody coming to hang out with us tonight to talk about FTC and COPPA. Let's see. What about mukbang channels? I wouldn't see anything inherently made for kids about eating food. Let's see here. Philippines Fun with JLB and Friends. Thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. What if you are an adult-oriented channel, but kids come on a vid? I have charity videos where we feed the homeless in the Philippines. A lot of them are kids. One of the examples I saw today that made a lot of sense is I don't think, again, those things that have been thrown around are an example of some of the factors that they use to consider whether or not your content is made for kids. There is plenty of content that is not made for kids, i.e. Game of Thrones, that has a ton of kids in it that's obviously not made for kids. So I don't think that just having kids in your content identifies your content as made for kids. I know people have been looking at that list and be like, these are some of the factors, and YouTube said those are some of the factors. I think I even showed the list in one of my videos because I think YouTube did a disservice the way that they actually showed them as bullet points. But I think that they are looking at a number of different things to determine whether content is made for kids. And when they were, going to go down the path of trying to find somebody, it's not just going to be some automated hit and a fine. They would obviously have to look at the content and say, hey, is this actually made for kids? If you're doing charity videos and working with the homeless, the idea that there are kids in those videos, in my mind, is certainly not going to identify them as content that's made for kids. Zuckstar, all YouTube needs to do is make it illegal for anyone under 15 to have a YouTube account. Done. We all know most young kids use their parents' accounts anyway. Yeah, but that's the point, that nobody under the age of 13 can have a YouTube account now, and we're only concerned about the kids that are under the age of 13. So the issue is, regardless of who owns the account, there are obviously kids on YouTube, either through lying about their age or using their parents' account. The point is, there are channels that are actively focused on kids. I have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. They are both on YouTube. They both have YouTube accounts. So there's obviously kids on YouTube. And basically what YouTube was, like I said earlier, for those of you who came into the live stream late, is YouTube was basically saying, hey, our site is only made for people 13 years and older, so we don't have to comply with COPPA. On the other side, they're going to major retail or major advertisers, and they're like, hey, YouTube is the #1 place for kids ages 2 to 11, and we are the #1 destination for kids on the internet. Obviously, they know that kids are coming in and watching content, plus they are serving them ads because they weren't in compliance with COPPA, and that's what resulted in the $170 million fine that the FTC dropped on YouTube. And Philippines Fun with JBL and Friends is now the Stream Boss. For those of you who have never been to this live stream, in the lower right-hand corner, we do the Stream Boss, just a fun way to give additional exposure to our contributors of Super Chat during the live stream. The chat actually gets pinned to the top, as you can see the comment in the top of the chat. Plus, the Stream Boss also allows you to take over the Stream Boss when you bring down those health points to 0. I believe it's like 10 points for every $1 of Super Chat. Whoever it is that drops him down to 0 is going to take over that spot and you get that additional exposure there in the lower right-hand corner until the next person comes along and knocks you off the hill. So just a fun thing we do during our live streams here on Creator Fundamentals. It's great to see everybody in the live stream tonight. For those of you who have never been to the live stream, we do this every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. Tonight we are talking about FTC and COPPA and all the craziness that's involved with it. So I appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with us tonight. And if you have any questions, you can tag at Creator Fundamentals in the chat, and I will do my best to take care of those for you. Got another super chat out there. Just want to acknowledge Office Mystic. Thank you so much for the super chat. I was going to have an animated character for my MS Office tutorials. Is that a bad idea now? I thought it would make my videos more interesting. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think people have kind of been going a little off the reservation in terms of, being super concerned about things like animation. But I mean, Microsoft Office itself used to have a little animated paperclip in the software, and nobody thought that that was something that was made for kids. It's just, a tool that people use. All kinds of major brands use animated characters to promote their brands, and they aren't trying to focus their brands on kids. It is just the nature of the, just the nature of marketing. So no, I don't think animation on its own is a clear identification of content that's made for kids. Again, not a lawyer, can't give you legal advice, but if it was me and I was thinking about doing that, I wouldn't let these changes stop me from doing it. And again, thank you so much for that super chat. I do appreciate it. We put all that money to good use, including things like the people of video that you see there in the upper right-hand corner. I am hosting a conference for content creators in Albany, New York on May 2nd and 3rd. You can go to peopleofvideo.com for more information and to get tickets. I'd love to see you guys all there. We're going to have a ton of great speakers. Nick Nimmon's going to be there, Cody Warner, Brian G. Johnson, Tim Schmoyer, Judy Fox from LinkedIn, a great crew of expert speakers who are going to share all their knowledge with you. Definitely looking forward to it. Obviously, I will be there as well. That is May 2nd and 3rd, 2020. If you've never been to a conference, you really need to come and hang out with us at People of Video. Getting the opportunity to get in one room with a bunch of like-minded creators is an awesome experience, and I highly recommend it. And what I'm trying to do is establish a place for us as creators to get together here on the East Coast, so we can not have to travel to Los Angeles or San Diego or somewhere over on the West Coast every time we want to get together with our fellow creators and brainstorm how we can grow our business and overcome adversity like FTC and COPPA and all the different challenges that we see as content creators and entrepreneurs as we try to build an audience and business around online video. All right, let me look at what's tagged in here, make sure I haven't missed anybody. Let's see. Crap, my dad makes me watch. Love the name. Our channel has my kids going or doing retro movie reviews. We chose not our kids. However, having children actors is our hang up. They star in every video. Yeah, I mean, I guess think about who your intended audience is, who you expected to watch the kids. Did you use the kids because you were trying to make movie reviews for other kids like them? Those are the kind of things that you need to kind of think about and consider whether or not your content. Texas News Studio, thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. I appreciate it. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, again, it's going to be like a case-by-case basis, but really kind of reflect on who you envision is your target audience with your kids doing those reviews. Emperor, do you think a teen-rated game can still fall into content for kids? I do think, I don't think simply having a game that's rated T for teen is necessarily going to eliminate it as, appealing to kids. Again, there's so many different ways to slice that I can't really give you a definitive answer, but I know that my kids probably watched or played games ahead of the rating system that the games come with. Every parent is going to assess their child individually and determine when they are ready or not ready for certain types of content. And I certainly think that you could have a audience under the age of 13 on something that may be marked T for teen. Because as we showed, YouTube is marked 13 and over, but there's obviously kids on the platform. So simply having that designation does not relinquish you of making sure that you're not collecting that personal identifiable information from kids. Alrighty here. What about private vids? We talked about that earlier. Honestly, I can't see how making videos private are going to absolve you from having to mark them one way or the other. Obviously, if they're private, then there's no information being collected, so I would find it hard for you to ever receive a fine for videos that aren't out there collecting PI for kids. But I would still go through the process of identifying them one way or the other, whether you choose to mark all your stuff as private or not. But at some point, that's got to give, and you got to make a decision one way or the other, because it's, you know, what's the long-term solution there after you've decided to hide your videos. Best Gamer, does removing videos save you from COPPA problems? Depending on what you perceive the COPPA problems to be, obviously, if you don't have content online, then COPPA is really not going to impact you all that much. The issue on YouTube is that advertising and other features on YouTube do, in fact, use personally identifiable information through the use of cookies and other what they call persistent identifiers in collecting information about user experience and user preference and user history and all that other stuff. That is where we have the problem, where we have content that has been created for kids but is linked to those systems that are collecting that personal identifiable information. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have any videos, then that process never takes place. Again, what about Sarah Sophia says, what about fitness lifestyle? Since it's technically okay for anybody to watch. Just because it's okay for anybody to watch does not mean that it's made for kids. If you're not targeting kids, I think COPPA talks about, you know, targeting kids in that respect. So I honestly don't know. Yeah, I mean, if you're not going out of your way to make content for kids, I wouldn't, personally, if it was my channel, I wouldn't mark my videos as made for kids just because they are, you know, not offensive to anybody. They're generally viewable by everybody. Merciful Crusade, so I may be in trouble if my video is based on a video game that's rated T and M. It said that you will get in trouble for animated characters, so no video games, ? I don't think that it specifically said. Let me see if I can find the actual wording of that, just to show you guys what it says. To determine, let's see. If I can find the section. Oh, let's see. We are trying to find, let's see, determine if your company has a website. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to find that particular article. But basically it says, it lists a number of things that they consider, but it doesn't say any one of these individual things automatically identifies your video as made for kids. It gave a list of things that says these are factors in determining whether or not your content is made for kids, and people took that and said, oh, if it's on the list, it means it's made for kids, and I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think these are multiple factors, all of which are a subset of which they use to determine whether or not any given piece of content is made for kids. Obviously, everything that contains an animation is not made for kids, and every video game is certainly not made for kids. So I don't think that each of those individual items should be looked at as if their single inclusion in content automatically makes that content made for kids. Let's see. J.E. Smith said during the FTC conference, oh, okay, I'll have to watch that. They mentioned that with the fines, they look at the revenue the violator makes and then apply a multiplier based on the revenue for that case. So, yeah. So, I mean, in that case, yeah, I haven't watched the entire presentation for that, so I'll have to check that out and see. But that was what we talked about earlier, which was it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a $40,000 fine. It's just the fines can go up to $40,000, and I think the actual figure of $40,000 was ultimately what they charged YouTube per violation. I think is where that particular number came from. But yeah, so in the FTC conference, so we'll definitely have to watch some more of that and make some notes on that as well. What if you do Nightcore with anime and art? See, a lot of these specific questions about your individual channels or the type of content that you make, the only person who's really going to be able to answer those questions is you. You really need to do some actual reading on this information that's out there. And again, for those of you that are asking specific questions about your channel, I do want to give you this link again to check out these articles to see whether or not you interpret them as being things that that you need to worry about for your content. So let me go back here. Is this the one? Let's see if I can find it. Complying with COPPA, frequently asked questions. We want who's covered by COPPA? What does the operator of a website have actual knowledge? For more information, definitely a bunch of resources on that link. Articles, there's an article on there that online privacy protection, not just for kids, 6-step compliance plan for business, complying with COPPA, frequently asked questions. And let's see. Let me see if I can find the particular section that says made clear to parents. No, made clear. Yeah, not immediately finding it. And it makes for really great live streams if I'm just reading. So definitely check out that link and do some digging, and you'll be able to find the specifics of what it outlines in terms of what is or isn't made for kids content. Thank you so much, Construction Cronies, for the super chat. I appreciate it. Just be honest about your content and your intentions here, and you will be fine. If you make content for under 13, then be cool, man, and do it right. Exactly. I mean, just as long as you are honest and you make a good, well-intentioned assessment of your content, I really don't think you have to worry about it. It seems like there's so much more panic and worry for the people that don't make made-for-kids content than the ones who actually are intentionally making kids content. And it is kind of an interesting situation because they're potentially the ones who are least impacted by this change, but it seems to be the audience that's the most stressed out about it because of what is perceived as the ambiguity of some of these rulings and how people interpreted them and made content about them. And looking at, some of those guidelines out of context or looking at the individual bullet points as if any single bullet point results in made for kids content, I think is what is really doing a lot of that stressing to people. All right. Again, if you have comments or questions, you don't have to tag me in all your comments because that would just get really busy really quick. But if you have questions, definitely tag at Creator Fundamentals in the chat, and we will take a look at that. YouTube main was made for 13 plus. Why we got YouTube Kids for? So YouTube Kids is obviously for content for children under the age of 13. But that said, there's still content on YouTube main that is geared towards kids and had the personal identifiable information being collected without the proper compliance with COPPA. Again, with the specific questions on the topics, Life of Steph Vlogs, what about Vlogmas for an adult who just want to celebrate Christmas? Would that be appealing for kids? Will Christmas be appealing for kids, period? What do you think? I would have a hard time believing, in my personal assessment, if it was my own content, I would not make the assertion that Christmas is only for kids. Obviously, there are kid elements to Christmas, but Christmas is it's a holiday that affects everybody who celebrates it, and it's not something to me that would automatically be identified as made for kids. Fortnite, I would probably have a hard time identifying a Fortnite channel as not made for kids. My 9-year-old plays Fortnite. Let's see. NB Videos presents, from your view, how would train videos, Railfin video, train simulators games be marked? They aren't made for kids as it's all trains. So again, use your common sense on that one. If you're not intending a child audience, then use that information to answer those questions. Like I said earlier, my kid likes farming equipment. He likes tractors and all kinds of the heavy equipment and stuff, but that doesn't make the John Deere YouTube channel made for kids. So try to use common sense, try to think about who you intended your audience to be, and use that information when you're answering those questions. Would a disclaimer at the beginning of each video saying it's not meant for kids help? I don't know that a disclaimer is necessarily necessary. There's a lot of necessarilies in there. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anything from a documentation standpoint that said that, you know, telling people that your content isn't made for kids is going to help you in any way. Again, it should be obvious by the content and your intentions who you're making content. You know, if you're making a video and you're singing ABCs, putting a disclaimer at the front that says this isn't made for kids is probably not going to do anything for you. But if you're making content that is, you know, for a general audience or an adult audience and you're not targeting children in it, then I don't necessarily think you would need the disclaimer. All right. I'm not as worried as I was. However, I'm worried is that the system is AI based and mistakes are going to happen with over 700 videos being Canadian too. Again, I think ultimately I definitely would not rely on YouTube's classification of your videos. I know 700 videos, that's a lot to work through, but I would go through and assess my own videos prior to that date. Just to make sure that they are set the way you intend them, because if YouTube makes a mistake, you're still liable for your content. So don't just rely on YouTube's automatic classification of your videos. So we are well past the 90-minute mark. I usually just do this from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday night. I hope you guys will join us in future live streams every Wednesday, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern. We talk about YouTube, answer questions. You know, as long as these COPPA-related issues are on the top of everyone's mind, we'll certainly field those questions as well. Again, if you are in the area in the Northeast on the East Coast, or you just want to come hang out with me and Nick Nimmin and Brian G. Johnson and Cody Warner and Tim Schmoyer in Albany at the People of Video Conference on May 2nd and 3rd, definitely head over to peopleofvideo.com for information and grab your tickets. They are going to sell out. It's a very limited number of tickets. It's a much smaller venue. This isn't thousands of people. So if you want to be able to mingle with all these guys, plus your fellow creators, learn how YouTube works, how to make money around your content creation and all that good stuff, definitely head over to peopleofvideo.com and check that out and grab your tickets before they are gone. The other thing, I am going to put this video up on replays. I will add all of the links that I shared during the live stream in the description below. And I appreciate it. Before you guys go, if you can hit that thumbs up, I do appreciate that. Also, thank you so much for hanging out. It has been a great time. Hopefully, we answered some of your questions and alleviated some of the stress or strain that you are worried about with your channel. Yes, we have rocky roads ahead of us in the short term. Hopefully, this is just a temporary bump in the road that we're going to be able to overcome. And I have good hopes that that is the case. And, you know, just stay tuned for more content. If I get any new information that I can share with you to help clarify this situation, I will absolutely do that. Thank you so much for hanging out in the live stream. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.